And it's just a little fun to try this on a few incidents, and then you lose interest in doing it. But I am now prepared for my third question. What do I actually find when I consider the evidence? I can say that never, and I mean never, do the events match the worst case scenario or even come close. My imagination had prepared me to face the music, if you will, and to reveal behavior that was not all perfectly pious, if that's what I find. But every time I go through this exercise, I end up with the same conclusion. Yes, there were different personalities, mistakes may have been made, and so on. But there is nothing here, nothing so disabling that I must collapse in a swoon with the certain knowledge that Mormonism is rotten, bad, false, lacking in authenticity. It's just not there. Of what do you have a testimony? A number of years ago, I was asked to speak at a combined priesthood meeting in the Federal Heights area. At the conclusion of my remarks, someone asked this question: what effect has your extensive study of church history had on your testimony? I wasn't really prepared for the question. I gave several examples of faith-promoting incidents, but that was the second and the least important part of my answer. The first words out of my mouth, and I assure you they were almost reflex, without long preliminary thought, were, I never had a testimony of church history. My testimony is in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I've had people who've heard me talk or been in some of my classes at the university, and they won't remember one other thing, but they somehow remember that one line. Let me anticipate a question that is bound to occur to some. Are there not some historical events that are essential to the restoration? Can I be indifferent to the following claims? Joseph Smith had a vision in the sacred grove. Plates were found, kept in his possession for a period of time, shown to witnesses and translated. Heavenly beings restored keys and priesthood authority. The list could be lengthened, but let us stop with those. These are historical events, if you will, events that occurred in historical time, but not a single one of them is subject to proof or disproof by historians. If I have a testimony of these events, it is not because of my advanced historical training or many years of delving into the primary documents of church history. My friend and colleague at the University of Utah, who taught Utah history for many years, was David Miller. David E. Miller. He taught a course in Utah history that was popular among all kinds of students. After summarizing the first vision, he said, now you can't prove things like this by historical evidence. You can't disprove them either. Bearing no testimony, but also using no ridicule, Professor Miller noted what Joseph Smith said, and then moved on to follow the history of the people who accepted the prophet's leadership. Well, short of being present during these transcendent manifestations, let us say recording them with a camcorder, all we can do is quote what people said about them. If any of us have a testimony of their historicity, it is not because of the kind of evidence that would stand up in a courtroom. It is because we believe other witnesses. It is because we have our own spiritual confirmation. I am not required to let historians determine for me what I will believe. When I say I don't have a testimony of church history, I mean that the gospel of Jesus Christ is not subject to the scrutiny by the feeble tools of the historian. The creation, the fall, the redemption, the merciful plan of the great Creator, all of these elements are simply not subject to proof or disproof by looking over old documents. On the other hand, the people who believed and accepted those doctrines are proper subjects for historical inquiry. In their achievements and failures, their high points and low, their trials and triumphs, in all the crooked timber of their humanity, these are imperfect people on the Lord's errand. They stumble and fall. They pick themselves up. They complain and lose their tempers. They become discouraged. They sometimes abandon ship. No one ever said the history of the church was the history of perfect people. In fact, if I understand correctly, the church is for the perfecting of the saints. Well, now, what was this religion they had subscribed to? If the Latter-day Saints in 1840 or 1870 or 1950 or 2004 were asked to lie, cheat, and steal, to be thoroughly bad people, let's hear about it. Let's see the evidence. Such a case cannot be made by any fair-minded investigator, but I don't doubt for a minute that those capable of making disgraceful documentaries like the Godmakers would like people to believe the worst of the Mormons. The makers, promoters, and distributors of such scandalous misrepresentations are possessed of a spirit, but it is not the spirit of kindness, not the spirit of charity, and not the spirit of truth. Consider the inexhaustible resource of material unscrupulous anti-Mormons can draw upon from 17 decades of church history. With people joining the church from different backgrounds, with human differences that inevitably manifest themselves, there will be examples of just about everything. You want a Mormon who was a thief, an embezzler, a grave robber, a cannibal? You want a Mormon who was not always in perfect control of his life and who made mistakes? That's too easy. As J. Golden Kimball might have said, hell, we can come up with cross-dressers, plagiarists, forgers. If you need someone who could recite the Articles of Faith and the Protocols of Zion while hanging from his knees on a flying trapeze, we can probably oblige you. Keeps life interesting, doesn't it? Dipping into this huge reservoir of human beings, plucking examples that suit their purpose, anti-Mormons will delight audiences already disposed to viewing Mormons as strange, unenlightened people. Their job is to make Mormons and their religion appear ridiculous and evil. As someone said about the disgraceful Michael Moore documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11, I see Michael Moore here in the audience. Here's the review. Any skilled filmmaker could fashion a movie making any American look like a pinhead. That's easy to do. Just get a bunch of video, some people who hate the guy, some factoids that may or may not be true, heat it up with sardonic rhetoric, and serve. Presto, Fahrenheit 9/11. And you can do history in that same way. And some of our friendly enemies do it that way. Another thing, your dedicated anti-Mormon has a repertoire of horror stories. If we think of our critic as an escapee from the reportorial staff of National Enquirer, we may be on the right track. Notice the similarities. First, we cannot be at all sure that the allegation is true. Think flying saucers landing on the church office building, but seen only by one highly favored witness. Even if the negative incident, whatever it is, can be substantiated, our critic studiously avoids addressing the question of how representative it is. The Lafferty brothers on death row in the Utah State Penitentiary, there, according to some, are some typical Mormons. The critic may make the argument less ridiculous by saying, yes, they are extreme, but they show what Mormonism can lead to. We see how dangerous it is.